Hi everyone, welcome back to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News Editor Kate Nagel. I'd like to welcome our next guest who's been in the news quite a bit the last couple of days here. Jennifer Wood, the Executive Director of the Rhode Island Center for Justice. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on, Kate.
Well, I appreciate it because this is really big news, not just here in Rhode Island, but nationally. This was the federal lawsuit filed yesterday looking to guarantee the right for students to a civic education, to an adequate education. So bring us through this. You know, we've heard folks maybe talk about this a little bit before, but now we've seen you take action. So how did the Center for Justice get involved and really go through the motions to say, here's what we're going to file in court?
Over the past year, we've held discussions all around Rhode Island, actually, with a lot of education advocacy groups, parents and students. Professor Mike Rebell from Teachers College at Columbia University had come to the state and really posed the question of, were we ready to bring a challenge in federal court, a challenge that will have national implications about whether or not children in fact have a constitutional right to an adequate education that enables them to participate in democratic institutions. We believe that the U.S. Constitution protects that right. In Rhode Island, there have been two cases brought in the state Supreme Court under the Rhode Island Constitution. And one of the reasons this case is happening in Rhode Island is that our state Supreme Court has said only the General Assembly in Rhode Island can decide how much education is adequate under the state constitution. So we have to look to our U.S. Constitution to improve public education in Rhode Island.
And impacting public education in Rhode Island with this being a federal lawsuit, would it apply just to Rhode Island or would it apply nationally?
If the federal district court in Rhode Island determines that, as we believe is the case, there is a federally protected right, then that will be a federal and national impact. It can be challenged. There are cases going on in other states, and they may work their way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, but ultimately it will have a federal impact. It will have a national impact.
And at the crux of it, as you talk about this civic education, to prepare the students to be able to be civic participants, does it really come down to simply civic education within the classroom, or is it broader than that?
No, I really want to emphasize that this is about young people's constitutional right to vote, the right to have access to our jury system, the right to participate in their First Amendment right to free expression, to right to assembly and petition the government. Unless young people are prepared in school to undertake those activities, they literally are being denied those enumerated constitutional rights. I think the most concrete example I can give you is jury duty. I'm sure you've gotten that card in the mail. I have as well. When you open that package that says, we're summoning you to come and be on a jury, you have to answer a series of questions, name, address, etc. One of the questions is, can you read and write in English? And in Rhode Island, we know that our English language learner students, many of them are not being well served. This has been much reported in the news. We've been ranked on some scales the last nationally in terms of that equity gap for our students. If you can't answer that question on the jury card, yes, I can read and write in English, even though you may have been born in this country, even though you may have been in a monolingual household as a young child, if you haven't gotten those skills through the public education system, you're frozen out of the jury system.
So let's talk a little bit about that, addressing that education. So looking for that constitutional protection, if you will. Does the suit, are you involved with looking as to how that looks, or are you simply looking from the court level to mandate this and then have the states or Rhode Island adhere to what they dictate?
So as with so many things, it's both very simple and very complicated. Here's the simple part. The simple part is that we're asking the federal court to look at all the previous U.S. Supreme Court law in this area, to look at the question we've presented and answer the question of whether or not children have a constitutionally protected right to an education that is adequate to prepare them to participate in democratic institutions. We believe that right exists. If the court says yes, it does, then the second part of the case is that right being met? Are young people in Rhode Island being prepared adequately to participate in voting, on juries, to exercise their rights to free speech?
So that's the part two, is that goes through the courts and then the examination.
If there's a right and it's being fulfilled, well then great. We believe, and we've mounted 47 pages of evidence in a complaint that suggests that that is not being met. So then, if the court were to determine that there is a right, it's not being fulfilled, Then the case comes back outside the realm of the judicial system into the realm of the community and the political system. What amount of education would be sufficient? How would we as a state organize ourselves around public education to deliver a quality public education that fulfills those needs?
And is that sort of getting the cart ahead of the horse to think about what that would even look like? I mean, you must be, not, I want to say myopically focused on the legal portion of it right now. But, you know, as you said, bringing the community together, it sounds like that would be a pretty large undertaking.
So actually, we're trying to run alongside the court.
Okay, dual path.
We're proceeding on two paths here. We've filed Wednesday night a case in federal court, and we intend to, of course, proceed very vigorously in that litigation. But we shouldn't wait until we get that answer. We intend to hold forums around the state asking Rhode Islanders, what would you like to see improved about your public education system? Do your kids know what they need to know to vote, to sit on a jury, to exercise their right to free speech, to participate in government? Most of the parents that we ask that question to say no. They do not have those skills. They don't know what they need to know. And then the next question is, well, then what should we change? And we're going to be doing that over the next year and a half, regardless of the outcome of this litigation, but in support of the litigation, because if we do prevail, and we expect that we will,
then you're ready to go.
We will be ready to have some community consensus around what really needs to be altered in our education system.
And wasn't just adults at the table yesterday when you had the press conference, again, filed late Friday night, but you had the youth there as well. And they were really the ones who said and affirmed these, assertions that you're making about how the schools are not preparing them.
Actually, the most inspiring part of this case for me as an attorney is representing these young people who have stepped up and stood up to say, I'm not prepared to participate in the democratic institutions of our country. I have not really gotten what I needed out of my public education to be ready. First of all, that's a huge admission.
Yeah.
I mean, for young people to actually raise their hand and say, you know what, I don't know what I need to know. I'd like to learn more. And Alita, who was one of the two young people who was at the press conference yesterday, was very clear. She said, I'm doing this for my little brothers. I'm not doing this for myself. I'm a senior in high school. I'm going to have to find my path. But while I'm still in school, I can stand up for them. We have plaintiffs in this case from the age of 3 weeks to senior in high school. And all of those children, either obviously our 3-week-old is represented by his parent in this case.
How many plaintiffs are there?
There are 14 young people.
Okay.
And they represent, it's a class action, so they represent all similarly situated public school students in the state.
So here you are talking about going on this dual track. It was filed on Wednesday evening. It's sort of hard to tell, I'm sure, how fast the wheels of justice and the process moves. I mean, what do you expect now moving forward, especially on the legal side?
Sure. Well, we know how the court system works. Basically, within the next 30 to 60 days, roughly, the defendants in the case, and the case is brought against all of the elected officials who have a role to play in setting education policy in the state. So basically, we've got the Senate President, we've got the Speaker of the House, the Governor, and the Education Commissioner, as well as the two boards, the Board of Education and the Council on Elementary and Secondary Education. Those are the named defendants. These people are not being sued as individuals. This is a systemic and structural issue. We're not saying that any one person created this problem, nor are we saying that the sitting officials created this problem. This problem has been decades in the making, and we're saying that we have got to really make a bold move now to make structural change in our education system.
And as we talked about, been getting a lot of attention for this in national press as well. Has anything surprised you in the reaction to this so far? Or have you just been getting calls by folks saying, wow, I can't believe you're doing this? Actually,
I've been so heartened because we knew that democratic participation is not a partisan issue. It's not an ideological issue. It's an American issue. It's fundamental to sustaining a healthy democracy that young people are prepared to participate in that democracy. And we're at a point in our nation where very few people have the skills and desire to have a civil conversation with people who are vehemently thinking differently than themselves. And we know that this next generation needs that preparation because there's plenty to argue about. But we need to be able to do it civilly and to bring evidence to our propositions and to agree to disagree at times.
So moving forward, would you say that you are going to encourage all Rhode Islanders to participate in this process as you have these forums, parents, students, generally interested community members to really turn out to have their voice heard?
Yes, we're going to be announcing forums to be held all around the state. We're working with educators, families, education advocacy organizations, a lot of the youth-serving organizations that fill the gap that is not currently being filled in public education are working with us to plan these and make sure that community voice is heard. It's not up to a small group of lawyers to decide what our public education system should look like. A judge is going to tell us what our rights are. We have a definite position about that and have articulated it, I think, clearly in the case. But we as a community have to decide what education system would be adequate to really prepare our young people, not just with literacy and numeracy, although that is necessary but not sufficient, but really what do people need to know in order to be active, robust participants in our democracy.
Well, I appreciate your taking the time to come in and talk with us a little bit here in studio. We'll be sure to be letting the folks know who are watching right now when these forums occur and any updates about this suit moving
Great,
forward.
thank you, Kate.
Jennifer Wood, thank you so much.
Great to see you.
Appreciate you tuning in for today's noontime show here in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. That wraps us up for today. We'll be back here on Monday with Josh Fenton with Small Biz Fuel and Business Monday. But of course, check in with GoLocalProv.com and find us on Facebook throughout the weekend. I'm GoLocal News.